It's Monday, the 13th of December 2021. Welcome to the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Morning, Michael.
Okay, 5 stories in 5 minutes. Here we go. Story number 1. Governments, Sean, across the country are racing to take control of the spread of the Omicron variant of COVID-19 and avoid further restrictions, with booster shots being pushed across the country.
That's right, Michael. There's been a rush of COVID cases, particularly in New South Wales and Victoria, and all the COVID news out of Europe seems bad. But the federal government and most of the state governments are now pushing for booster vaccinations rather than restrictions. In Victoria, over the last 3 days, there were more than 3,300 cases. In New South Wales, there were more than 1,500 cases. They're back to mid-October levels. Not so good. Now, Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt yesterday said booster shots were now essential, and people are being pushed to have third booster shots 5 months, not 6 months, after the second jab. More than 1.5 million Australians are now eligible for a third jab. And finally, Queensland reopened its border to New South Welshmen and Victorians last night, Michael, with chaos expected at border crossings in the next few days. As a result, of course, Western Australia tightened its border with the Sunshine State.
Of course it did. All right, story number 2, Sean. It was a record weekend for home auctions. We've actually had a series of records for home auctions, but this weekend saw 4,970 houses going under the hammer nationally. How did it all go?
It was good without being great, and that's the trend in the last month or so. The national clearance rate fell to 66.6% according to CoreLogic. As you mentioned, it was the biggest weekend since CoreLogic began keeping records back in 2008. And it beat last weekend's record numbers. Obviously, people are trying to sell by the end of the year. Melbourne had 2,300 auctions and a clearance rate of 65%. Sydney had almost 1,800 auctions with a clearance rate of 64%. Now, anecdotally, prices still remain high. Adelaide had the best clearance rate at 84% based on more than 300 auctions. This is happening as lenders, and ANZ did it on Friday, are lifting their fixed mortgage rates. Now, those higher interest rates are just one of the reasons we're not seeing the clearance rates that we saw a month or two ago.
Okay, now story number 3, Sean. Interesting one. Most people aren't using the mobile data that they're paying for. This is from a report from the communication regulator about the communications market.
Yes, it's that time of year when we get reports from a lot of the government bureaucracy, and the reports often provide quite a good insight into consumer behaviour. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission found that the big telcos, Telstra, Optus and TPG, generally did a good job during the pandemic, but broadband and mobile prices have risen over the past year, and most people aren't using the data they're paying for. In fact, on average, over the past couple of years, consumers only used 11.8 gigabytes of data per month compared to the median data allowance of 35 gigabytes. Along the same lines, the ACCC's latest petrol monitoring report shows that motorists are currently paying the highest petrol prices in 7 years. No surprises to any of us filling up recently.
Yeah, that might be one of those ones where we don't really need a report to tell us that petrol prices are ridiculously expensive right now.
You're right.
Now, Sean, story number 4 is not good news as we head into Christmas. Beer is being rationed across some bottle shops. What's going on?
Well, we've got the Australian newspaper to thank for this story. Australia's 2 largest brewers are facing delivery delays and shortages coming into Christmas. Lion and Carlton and United Breweries have both issued warnings to customers and sales reps, with limits in place at BWS shops for beers such as VB, Pure Blonde and Carlton. All of those, of course, being very, very big sellers. One of the country's most popular beers, Corona, which is imported from Mexico by CUB, is suffering such massive supply issues, stores are restricted to order a maximum of 20 cartons each week. Now, I'm not sure, but I reckon this happened last year as well.
It's almost as though we drink a lot at Christmas or something, Sean.
Funny though.
Now, finally, story number 5, and this is a bit of a tenuous link to the world of business, but there is apparently a scientific reason for why we all have a dessert stomach. Even when you've had a huge Christmas lunch, there is still room for pudding.
Yes, it's called the sensory-specific satiety mechanism. Now, I have to credit the Financial Review for this story. Apparently, variety excites the appetite, and it's evolutionary. When our predecessors binged on buffalo, then found a patch of ripe berries, skipping the nutrients in the berries wasn't an option. So the body developed different limits for different types of food as a way to help ensure a balanced intake of nutrients. It's one of the reasons that most people eat a fairly balanced diet, even though they know little about nutrition. It's even more prevalent in kids than adults. Eventually, the gut releases a hormone that causes nausea after about 1,500 calories. But that's why there's always room for pudding.
Sean, you have taught me something today that I did not know and something that I would not have expected to hear in a business podcast, but there you go. That's it, the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael.
It's Monday, the 13th of December, 2021. Remember to hit follow on the podcast, and if 5 minutes isn't quite enough, then you can find our longer podcast called Fear and Greed on your podcast platform. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.